I talked about it on a special episode yesterday. The Berkey basket is empty. But according to some sports media folks in Seattle and at the national level, the Berkey basket was a bread basket. And I'm going to explain why.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Seattle hockey fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Erica L. Ayala coming to you from our new headquarters. I'm still getting the background all situated, so we'll have our Kraken gear. Don't worry. I know a lot of you check my background to see if we've got Kraken stuff, but we'll get it going. We'll get it going. Of course, I am your host of Locked On Kraken, been your host since the very beginning. I am also a contributor at CBS Sports, where I talk women's basketball. I also have a podcast covering your Seattle Storm. They got a huge win over my New York Liberty. We're going to talk about that on Black Rosie Media later tonight. And I'm also accredited for the 2026 Milano Cortina Olympics. If you're an everydayer, you drop in every day, especially if you're an OGer, then you know, I believe I told y'all I have a special assignment, me personally. I have a special assignment at the Olympics, but we'll get to that in the coming months. You know, we just got to summer. Let's not, focus too much on the Winter Olympics here, but I do want to focus on the Andre Burakovsky trade. I broke it down a little bit for you. Just wanted to get the news out. Now let's focus on the analysis. I am going to come to some of your comments, but also I was listening to Brock and Salk. Mike Salk and Brock Heward, they had Greg Wyshynski from ESPN on, and I was listening to this segment in stitches. I was laughing because these guys effectively called Andre Burakovsky soft. They called him soft. That's my New York accent coming out. They called him soft. And you know what? And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. Because what Greg and the guys were saying is that these moves, including bringing on Mason Marchment, which we talked about last week, bringing, or getting rid of more so Andre Burakovsky, it's all about making this a tougher team, a tougher Seattle Kraken team to play against. And we need it. I've been wanting my P&V everydayers. You know what that stands for. I'm going to try not to say it too much. Probably when I get excitable. I want my grit. I want my sandpaper. And these guys, they might be able to bring it. I want to go to a comment that I got regarding Mason Marchment, which I thought was hilarious. So we got on social media, the Seattle Kraken gave us a little bit from Mason Marchment, aka Mush. And so Native Hawaiian, a few days ago, going to miss Mush, but he needs to stay out of the sin bin. He knows how to use his size and skill as a good F1, but he is consistently on the wrong end of the drawn penalty, real or imagined by the Zebras, the officials that being. Listen, and I said, hopefully he finds a good balance, but to be honest, I'll take it either way. Seattle can play a bit softly or small is probably more like it. This is what I'm talking, these are the comments that we got regarding Mush and what I responded, saying that we're a little soft or we play small. I've been telling you this for years. I've been saying this for years. The Seattle Kraken just need to get some moxie. We need to get a little big, and we've got guys that are big in size, height, whatever, weight, but we don't always use it, or we use it more so out of frustration instead of strategically. We're reacting instead of, being able to do something that Dan Bilesma wanted to do, be the aggressors, right? Be the aggressors. We've not done that enough. So if these moves are to make us tougher, less soft, I was cracking up hysterically. It's clear that Brock and Salk did not like Andre Burakovsky. At the end of that clip, with Greg Wyshynski, they do not mince words, including that, this move, the best part of it is that you don't have to watch Berkey again. But, let's take away some of the edge. I know I talked about not being too soft, but I want to be fair. I want to be fair here on the show. Andre Burakovsky wasn't working out for us. I've been saying that for years. Apparently, I'm not the only one who saw it, who believed it. I remember, I guess 2 years ago now, getting comments like, oh, he's injured. He's injured. I get it. I'm watching the games. I talk about this all the time. Locked on Kraken, your team every day. I'm talking about it. I understand injuries, and it wasn't an indictment on Burakovsky while he was injured. It was more of the Seattle Kraken putting the team in a position where you are relying on a guy that's injured to be your offense. Where was it coming from if Burakovsky wasn't healthy enough to play? That was my gripe. And then, yes, last season, sometimes I ask questions as opposed to make assertions. Where was he? Where was he last year? In his head, from what it sounded like. It's time. It was time. It was time. So, again, Seattle Sports agreeing here. It's a really great segment. Highly recommend it that you take a listen. But yeah, Greg Wyshynski feeling that these moves alone can make the Seattle Kraken tougher. He also did talk about Lane Lambert, which I thought was hilarious. He says, I'm coming off of covering the Stanley Cup final, covering a Paul Maurice, and says Lane Lambert has about 1% of the charisma of Paul Maurice, which is to say not a lot. And then Brock and Salk ask if that is more or less charisma than Dave Hakstol. Remember what I said when we got Lane Lambert? I said, listen, he's not as vocal or verbose, perhaps. He's not going to go on and with the kind of shaking his head and lots of pauses. Oh my gosh. Dan Bilesma would have these pregnant pauses, that phrase, pregnant pauses. And he would just, and I was like, dude, spit it out. I did like talking to him comparative to Dave Hakstol, who, if anything, he would argue semantics. He would argue, I don't believe in momentum, but yes, I do think, things can carry over. And it's like, oh, okay, dude. So Lane Lambert, I think he's a little bit in between Dave Hakstol and Dan Bilesma. 1% of Paul Maurice, maybe. I've only covered Paul Maurice a few times in Florida, but I mean, he's a fun guy to talk to. I can tell you that he's a good guy I find him a fun guy to talk hockey with. So Paul Maurice, in so many ways, right, is the standard. We're not quite there, though, with Lane Lambert, but it was an interesting conversation or manner of thinking with Greg. He says that he's willing to give Lane the benefit of the doubt when it comes to what this season could look like, given how things ended when he was a head coach in Long Island. He's covered that team, covered that era of the Islanders. And that's what Gil and I talked about. Gil Martin, our host of Locked on Islanders, also the host of a few different things over at the Locked on NHL channel. I collaborate with Gil a lot, probably most out of anyone, just because there's so many, he does all the things. But I think everyone's willing to give Lane the benefit of the doubt. Sounds like, the softness of Berkey was not necessarily gonna gel with Lane's approach, which is interesting because Burakovsky is one of the players that we talked about that on an episode before. It wasn't a long time. Lane Lambert was an assistant in Washington. So, take it for what it's worth. Whew, excuse me, my allergies are really acting up. I apologize if I sound a little nasally, more than usual, I should say. But anyway, we're getting tougher. We're getting tougher. I also want to say, before we go on to the next segment, because I want to talk about some, Greg Wyshynski was asked a question, what do we know? What does this tell us? Who are the Seattle Kraken? I loved his answer. I think you're going to know soon why I loved his answer. But when it comes to this move between the Mason Marchment trade, which was for picks, and Andre Burakovsky for Vanello, we don't quite break even, but the offloading Burakovsky more or less puts us in, what is it, 1,000 or so, or excuse me, puts us within, I don't know, like $1 million or so, $1 million and some change, within breaking even. So we're not losing that much money. I like that. $1.5 million, I think, probably closer to that. I thought I did the math somewhere and I can't find my notes. The trade, we offload 5.5 million. We spend like 2.8 for Vanello. So, and then thinking of the Marchment deal, that's where, the numbers about balance out, give or take $1.5 million. That's not bad for a team that already had some salary cap space. So I just wanted to bring that up because we're making moves that I think do make us tougher without breaking the bank. And we had a comment from one of our everydayers for sure in Striatic asking, what are we going to do with that money if we do anything? And is it a matter of us doing that this year? So coming up on today's show, first I want to get to the question that Wyshynski was asked, who is this Kraken team? What do we know about them? And then we'll get into some other comments and how does this set us up? And what does this tell us about the Seattle Kraken? I think the Cale Fleury contract also, I alluded to that on yesterday's episode. I think the Cale Fleury transaction extension gives us a little peek into the window of when, quote, as soon as possible is. We'll talk about that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Well, then you want to crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. Now, I told you I'm in a new workspace. We have Wonderful Pistachios in the break room, in the snack area, which means that I have my on-the-go snacks at my new location now. It is the shell variety, which is more of the zen, like, ooh, we're going to have a good time. We're going to crack open a shell and, like relax into it to get our protein. Some of you, though, you might want the grab and go. Yes, the grab and go pack, but you don't want to crack the shell. You're going to be in your car or wherever, and you don't want to have to discard the shells. You're not going to throw them out the window because that would be, irresponsible. We have to take care of Mother Earth. So you got to be a little more mindful when you have the shells. But if you have a grab and go, no shells, no problem. So either way, we want you to get snacking and get cracking, Seattle hockey fans, with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, Seattle hockey fans, welcome again to another episode of Locked On Kraken. Whether we're your first listen, your midday listen, or your nightly, little nightcap, whatever the situation is, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for engaging on YouTube. I also want to shout out my homies over on Blue Sky because that's where I hang social media wise anyway. We appreciate the comments. Never think you're going too long. I am the queen of long form. I am the queen of going ranting for what feels like hours. You never have to worry about commenting too much for me. We try to keep it respectful. But thank you for the comments. I appreciate it. And we're going to get to some comments. Greg Wyshynski. I got to meet him a few times, but the first time I met him was actually, I was covering Matty Beniers, not at the Olympics, but at the Frozen Four. So this is again before he joined the Seattle Kraken, already drafted, but he stayed at Michigan. And it turned out that he played in that Frozen Four in Boston. So I got to go there. It was a great tournament. And I got to, you see someone's name and then you introduce yourself and he's like, yeah, I love your work. And I'm like, what? I love your work, man. It's so wild. I get on here 5 days a week in season and it still boggles my mind when I meet people in the wild that actually know what I do. Even though, that's kind of the whole point, but it's also very strange. So I've said this before. If you see me in public, please come say hi. And also introduce yourself because I might not know who you are. And I'm not going to assume, that you know who I am. So I'm going to probably say, hi, my name is Erica. I don't think it's appropriate to be like, oh, like if we've clearly met before, But if I'm meeting you for the first time, I'm going to introduce myself. That I just, anyway. Enough about that. Greg, great guy, said hi. He took some time out for an up-and-comer to just kind of validate my work and say that he was aware of it. I really appreciated that. There's a few guys, a few NHL folks that are covering the league at a pretty high level that have taken the time out to support me because it's not just guys, it's also women as well. Anyway, Greg on, with Brock and Salk, he was asked, who is this Seattle Kraken team or something akin to that? I didn't write down the actual question, but I did write down Greg's answer, which is exactly what I've been telling you, especially like a couple of weeks ago. I couldn't get this out of my head. Who are we? I don't know. I can't tell you. I don't know yet. We've been trying to figure this out for 4 seasons. And that's what Greg said. Been trying to answer that question for years. For years. Do we know right now? I don't think so. Not completely, especially because we have a new head coach. We have a new GM. We have our old GM who's now the president. We've got new guys on the roster. We probably will have a few other people that'll switch around. Who knows if, we're hearing reports. Philip Grubauer is our guy. Well, not the main guy probably, but one of our guys. So we're not going to get goaltending. There's another thing Greg didn't say on this interview that I thought was interesting, but we'll get to that later. But who are the Seattle Kraken? Well, if you heard the first segment, at least early returns indicate that we're going to be a tougher team. Is that only because we got rid of the breadbasket? I don't know. At least that's what I think that's what the guys think about Berkey. Mason Marchment, I think, makes us tougher. Does Lane Lambert make us tougher? He's very defensive minded from everything that I'm hearing. I hope he says he wants to be tough. But remember, and I know I talked to, I got to get this shake. I got to get this wobble fixed. Probably lift this up. Anyway, that was for those watching on video. The table shakes a little bit here. I got to fix that. Okay. Apologies. All right. And I'm back. Dan Bilesma said he wanted to play tough. He wanted to be the aggressors, right? I broke that down a lot. I think Was I the one who asked that question? I might have been. I don't know. Because I want grit. I want sandpaper. I want the P and V. So I've heard that before. It has not come to pass. So I will take on paper that people believe this can be a tougher Seattle Kraken team. I will take that on paper. I need to see it, though. I have to see it to believe it. I am not going on blind faith. Now, we are going to hold fast. We are going to stay true, but that does not mean we are fools. Warm and truthful. Warm and truthful is what I always aim to do. All right? Who is this team? We don't know. We don't know. Are we going to be an older team? Are we going to be a younger team? Are we on the wrong side of this number, on the right side of that number? I don't think we know. We did get younger. Vanello, 25. Berkey out the door, 30. So there you go. Speaking of youth, the next move. That was another great question that the guys asked Brock and Salk with Greg Wyshynski from ESPN. What's the next move? Are there moves? Are there moves to make? We need a little everything. So yeah, there's some moves to make. This is where I want to pause. I'm going to step away from this conversation on Seattle sports. I really did enjoy it. I'm going to circle back to it, but I want to pause and go back actually to the Cale Fleury thing. If you're looking at the sidebar, I know I'm going all out of order. Don't even worry about it. The Cale Fleury thing to me indicates that this is not a team that's going as soon as possible, meaning this season. I talked about it a little bit the other day. Cale Fleury had difficulty cracking the Seattle Kraken roster when we were kind of a hot mess. Was that because of coaching? Was that because of personnel? A little bit of both. A 2-year one-way deal makes me think one of two things, at least two things. The first being that we're not really expecting to be super uber competitive this coming season for 25-26. Now we might eke in. We got there earlier than I think we were supposed to in season 2. We have yet to get back. That's the problem that we're trying to fix. But Cale Fleury does not move the needle to figuring out the identity of this team outside of what it has been. Does that make sense? Cale Fleury he's not he's someone who's come up in the organization, but I don't know that skill set wise and experience wise, he gives us enough to really push the needle. But maybe I'm wrong because, and now this is where I go back to Brock and Salk with Greg. There was a few things that Greg said that I found really fascinating, including that he talked about hoping that you hit. I'm going to quote him because he says, you hope you hit. You hope you hit. And he was talking about maybe with this salary cap that we have, maybe with the picks that we have, you find someone and you, quote, hope they hit. He mentioned Trevor Zegras. He mentioned what Sam Bennett was and is, at least as of now, free agent UFA. Although, if you believe a guy right after he wins a Stanley Cup, what is he, like climbing poles and saying that he's going to stay with Florida? I don't know. Was that real or not? Who knows? A girl can hope. It ain't over till it's over. Anyway, what he said about Sam Bennett is that where he was drafted, when he was drafted, underperformed at that position for the expectations that came along with that. Then he comes to Florida, and look at the guy now. Look at us now, right? Look at us now. So that's the hope you hit. Greg mentioned Zegras. I know I've done some polling over the last year or so. Y'all, as a fan base, don't seem to want Greg Zegras, at least the listeners on this show. You don't want Greg. Or, excuse me, I said Greg Zegras. You don't want Trevor Zegras. That's what Greg Wyshynski said about a quote-unquote hope you hit kind of guy. Can he be a Sam Bennett? Can he be an Artemi Panarin? And with Panarin, though, he talked about grabbing someone, getting a high-value, high-talent person maybe right before you're ready to be a quote perennial playoff team. And you get a guy knowing that he's a hit. And then you get some other young guys hoping that they will hit. And the two intertwine and get you within maybe a 1 to 3 to 5 year window where you are that playoff team. And I do think that's more likely. I think the Cale Fleury, maybe I'm reading into my tea leaves a little bit too much, but the Cale Fleury thing, is more of, let's kind of stick with some guys that are solid enough that we can work with, that are in our organization, so we're not overspending. I don't think the Seattle Kraken are ready to overspend yet. And that was another question that came up with Brock and Salk and Greg. But what Greg said is that not just the Sam Bennett's, not just the Artemi Panarins, which I think when I was listening to them, I was thinking of more of a staggered approach. You get someone really solid right before you're ready to have some of those young guys hit. He talked about the part of what we're seeing with the Florida Panthers that perhaps is not the replica that cannot be reproduced. Holy cap. I still can't speak English. Holy crap. Let me slow down. I'm talking too fast. The part of the formula that might not be as easy to replicate, is that the talent, the grit that Florida had, the physicality that we saw them play against a very highly skilled Edmonton team came from their homegrown folks. And you hang on to enough of them that know the culture, that are going to fight for the culture. They're going to hold fast. They're going to stay true. And then you build around that heartbeat. They didn't spend a lot of time on that, but I would love to dive into that. Asterisk, earmark that, put it in the parking lot, whatever you want. Because when I get to Seattle, I'm going to start asking these questions. I want to hear from Everett, Mike, Allison, Pepper, JT, John. What do they think about that? And when you keep a Cale Fleury, maybe Jason's onto something. Speaking of Jason Botterill, I think he might be legit. I think we got a good one, folks. Let's talk about that as we close out today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of the Locked On Kraken podcast brought to you by FanDuel, because summer sports are in full swing. The Seattle Storm got a really good win over, again, sad face, my New York Liberty. Whether you're about baseball under the lights, whether you're about golf on the green, the WNBA, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. My friends don't get sunburned, well, for a few different reasons, including that we like to play outside and get our vitamin D safely. Don't get sunburned. It's not cute. Listen, you can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, fast payouts. You know I love looking at the future bets, and we will do that, especially because we're getting close to the draft. And so whether you're placing same-game parlay, watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you are part of the action. Are you new to FanDuel? Well, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Is Jason Botterill legit? Well, Greg called the early moves by Jason, incredible. And I'm hard pressed to it's hard for me to disagree. Here's what Striatic, again, everydayer for sure. The Berkey trade was as clean a cap dump as I've ever run across. Now, can we do anything useful with the cap space? Do we even want to this season? That's the big question. There you go. We've got Brenda. I believe it's Werner. Apologies if I mispronounced that. As a Seattle resident but diehard New Jersey Devils fan, there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the team. Agreed. And again, some of the questions that Striatic is asking, will we do anything useful with the cap space? Do we want to this season? There is a lot that needs to be done. We have to figure out goaltending, which is another reason why with the Cale Fleury news, the news that, or the reports that we are not going to buy out Philip Grubauer. Again, the price tag, I understand that a little bit more than I did maybe even in the middle of last season. As much as we know that's not working out, you want to talk about the Berkey basket. This is like, I don't know, an anchor weight, it feels like sometimes with Philip Grubauer. The money for the buyout, then to get another goaltender, and do we even find a goaltender that we like that's going to give Joey Daccord more rest, give the guy some rest? I don't know. I think we're in about a 2-season holding pattern, including next year. I think it's going to take us about 2 years. Maybe we'll start to, hit, as Greg said, in that second season. So if we're going into 25, 26, I think by 26, 27, we need to know who this team, we need to be able to answer those questions. Maybe not definitively, maybe not finitely, maybe it doesn't come because of the results are guaranteed. They're there. It's the early stage. It's the uptick, right, of that perennial playoff team. I think it comes not this coming season, but the season after that in 26, 27. I sure hope it does. That's when, if you look at what the Seattle Kraken are dealing with when it comes to, okay, so, and I've talked about this before, but 26, 27, Jaden Schwartz, UFA, Jordan Eberle, UFA, Mason Marchment, Ellie Tolvanen, Vanello, RFA, Mason Marchment, Ellie Tolvanen, just to clarify, are UFAs. Vanello is an RFA. Capo Caco he's an RFA now, but he'd be a UFA. Jamie Alexiak, UFA 26-27. 26-27, we have a lot of decisions to make. And that's another reason why I think we're going to take the time to answer those questions, feel things out, give Lane Lambert, I think he gets at least a year. Good grief. Hopefully he gets at least a year. I mean, if he doesn't get at least a year, that means he would have been fired even quicker than the separation between the Kraken and Dan Bilesma. But let's not think about that. Think happy thoughts. Think happy thoughts. Think happy thoughts. I think 26, 27 is when we can start seeing the chips fall. The spaghetti that's going to stick will be sticking, so to speak. And we'll know what needs to be done. We'll be ready to do what needs to be done in 26, 27. We're making the space. We're setting the expectation. That's what I think this year is all about, is laying a new foundation. We found some cracks. We want to lay a new foundation. That's what I think. But I do think Jason Botterill is pretty legit. George C. Kraken, huge Botterill win, no salary retention, no picks dealt, and the player we received is on a 1-year low cap hit contract, giving us flexibility. You see, had no idea this was even possible. So he's blowing minds here. Striatic and George C. Kraken, some of my most loyal commenters, loyal listeners / viewers, are like, what is going on here? Had no idea this was even possible. Wish Berkey the best in Chicago, but a change was needed for all parties. Absolutely, George. I agree with you. Jorge. Love it. A question from Scott, 23 Dogs. If Gruby is traded, what are our options for backup goalies on the team or in the marketplace? And that is the question, right? And then I commented, not to mention, even if there is a good replacement in the market, what is the price tag? I think it is probably the best decision to keep Gruby, but woo, does the organization have a lot of work to do to smooth out that relationship? I am very curious how the Seattle Kraken walk back some of what happened with Philip Grubauer last season. Because as much as I do think we need to move on from him, the way it was done felt gross and unnecessary. And was that a part of the changes that we saw? One guy gets promoted, the other guy gets fired. You can make up your own mind about that. I don't know. And again, we have a new goalie coach. So how's that going to work out? Stubby 486 Marchment. Ellipse. He did not write that. He typed it. I'm just giving you the grammatical context. Ellipse. This will be interesting, period. Not a lot of emotion there, Stubby 486. I do think it will be interesting. Interesting good, interesting bad, interesting. We got to wait till 26, 27 to find out. We don't know. We don't know yet. But what I did comment is Marchment is the cousin, I believe, of Kennedy Marchment, whose game, oh man, I love Kennedy Marchment's game. Ruthless. It's smooth, but ruthless. And if there's a little bit of that Marchment family energy that, exists, I will take it. I will absolutely take it. So those are some of the comments. I do think Jason Botterill so far is legit. He's giving me movement, which is what I have been asking for. I have been demanding. I have been begging for several seasons with the Seattle Kraken. And it's not even July 1st. We haven't even gotten to the draft. Speaking of the draft, we know that this is the first time in the NHL that the higher-ups, the table, the war room is not on the draft floor for the NHL. They'll be back at headquarters. So there will be media availability on Friday, and I believe Jason will also speak Saturday. We're still waiting on the full details. We did get the update, though, for Friday. So for Friday, we will hear from, as we have in the past, our general manager. This year it will be Jason Botterill. We will also hear from our amateur scouting director, Robert Cron. So I will not be there. I am in the middle of a move, so I will not be in Seattle this time around, but I will be talking about it. I'll be keeping eyes on what's going on. And of course, we will have any video that is available that we will show here on Locked On Kraken. Let me know what you think. Is Jason Botterill legit? What do you think about the Cale Fleury move? Are we in a 1 to 3 year pattern, a 3 to 5 year pattern, or can we actually make the playoffs next season? I know those are a lot of questions, but there's still a lot of questions to answer or to ask, at least, for the Seattle Kraken team, including who are we taking in the draft with a team that has so many needs? Who are we taking? Well, we'll break down what the experts are saying around the NHL community coming up throughout the week. A reminder to be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another, and hold fast, stay true and loud and proud. We say always, let's go Kraken. And I will catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.